Hey guys, Cameron from Bates Motel, Season 4, Episode 2, Goodnight, Mother, and holy shit, this episode. Oh my god, guys. I mean, talk about going from 0 to 60 in one episode. I mean, this felt like a season finale at points. Now, let me just say, the first 30 or something minutes of this episode, some of it I really wasn't into. I will be honest with you guys. I thought some of the episode was a bit just meh. I'm like, this is fine, nothing amazing. But then the ending of this episode, I mean, that is exactly what I sign up for when I watch Bates Motel. I mean, that's what I want every single week. What we got the last 10 minutes of this episode, if that is truly where we're heading the rest of this season, this is going to be insane. I mean, it really is, but it makes sense because that's exactly the territory that we need to go into. The show needs to get crazier or it's going to get boring, and that's the thing with the show. It needs to always be at 60. You can't have it at 0, and I think this episode really showed that. But let's just get into this episode because, for the most part, I really did enjoy this episode. But the last 10 minutes were probably some of the most amazing stuff I've seen from this show. So, we see after Norman is murdered, Audrey, we see the next morning Norma phones Greg Edwards with a request to have Norman and Meyer to Pineview under his care, and she then tells Norman they had another blackout and fell asleep and that it was really bad, and you can tell that she really doesn't know what to do. Like, she really needs to get this help, and she tries to tell Norman what's going on, but right away he's questioning her about, leaving him locked in her bedroom, but she lies, and of course, Norman doesn't think he did anything wrong because of how, crazy he's become. He now thinks that the mother personality is really Norman. You really do start to see that in this episode. But she lies, telling him that she went to buy groceries and says that she'll prepare breakfast, and obviously that's not true at all. She's being very shady, and I'm like, oh great, another one of these episodes, because I will say, I don't love the episodes where Norman and Norma are keeping something from each other. We spend an entire episode with them in each other's throats, and then the end of the episode, oh, they finally reveal to each other. Those go nowhere. Those really don't. And that's what this started as, but then got much crazier. And it makes sense because Norman is not the Norman we've seen through seasons 1 through 3. This is a much different Norman, and we definitely see that throughout this episode, and, she's making all these excuses. She's trying to say, she went to buy groceries and living a normal life. And I like the way that Norma's playing this. She's playing this off as if there's nothing wrong, because she has to make it seem that way, because he doesn't think there's anything wrong. And if he doesn't think there's anything wrong, that means that she has to make it seem like there is nothing wrong. Which obviously there is a problem at hand, but Norman doesn't want to deal with it, and she can't really do anything about that. So, really good way to start the episode, definitely. And while he's washing his face, he pictures, Norma. We see that he's washing his face. Everything seems to be okay. Like, it seems like he's forgiven her, things like that. But then we get to when things get crazy, because he pictures who he sees as Norma. But the thing is, when we see it, it is Norman in Norma's wig, like how it is in Psycho. You know how he had that wig? That's very much what we saw here. And basically, he's attempting to bury Audrey before dragging her body down to the basement and placing it in the freezer. When Audrey opens her eyes, she snaps back to reality, and you can tell that he's just completely gone. He's too far gone. He's not thinking that this, he's thinking that something that didn't happen, and while having breakfast, he wonders why Norma's being so secretive, and she just tells him to eat his breakfast, which, again, I was just like, really? We have to deal with something like this? Because I didn't want to deal with it. It was stupid, and I didn't want to go through an episode like that. Luckily, that's not what this episode is, but the first half of this episode is pretty much like that. But I will say, if you are Dylan or Emma right now, I mean, you're kind of in paradise because you're away from all this chaos, and that's something I do like. But I will say, I do want to see Dylan and Emma eventually come back to this story, because while they do have some really sweet stuff in this episode, and I really do like them as a couple, and I've liked them as a couple, I do want to see them come back. I know that Dylan got away because he just couldn't deal with it anymore, but remember, the whole reason that Dylan left is because Norma wasn't doing anything, and he knew that there was a problem, and he was frustrated. That's why he left. Emma left because she needed the surgery, and eventually they're going to come back to White Pine Bay. That's just got to happen. But we see at the hospital in Portland, Emma's tube is removed so she can start breathing unaided, and she has a bit of difficulty at first, but then relaxes, and I like seeing this. I like seeing Emma without the tube. We've always seen her with the tube, and this is the first episode where she doesn't have the tube anymore. It's a good direction to take her character in. But here's the thing. This show is never happy, and with something happy happening to her, I really feel fear the worst for Emma and Dylan. I don't. One of them, they're not making it out this season. I'm saying that now, and I definitely don't see one of them living. I'll definitely say that. So Norman approaches Norma with the suggestion of watching a film, but she tells him that she needs to go down to the motel since the guest checked out, and she hadn't time as she was looking after him, and he says he didn't see anyone down there, and she tells him he was blacked out for 24 hours before saying that she'll be right back. And you don't actually know if there's someone down there. We really don't. We don't know if there's someone down there, or if Norma's just playing this off as she's, scared and trying to get away, but you can tell that she's trying to be really chill about this whole thing. Like, she's just acting like it's a normal day and there's nothing wrong with Norman, which, again, is the best thing to do. It's just not the most interesting episode. That was the thing with me. At this point, I was just like, okay, this is fine, but it's just not that interesting. It's kind of just, kind of sluggish. And we then see Norman head down to the basement where he finds his taxidermy out and approaches the freezer, only to find it empty completely, and he doesn't know why. And when Norma returns, she goes down the basement where she finds Norman next to the freezer. She questions why the taxidermy is out, and he suggests it's because someone took them out to make room for something else, something bigger, and he tells her he knows why she locked her in his room, and she tells him that she told him why, but he says that she needs to start being honest with him so he can get her help, and he asks where she put Audrey, and says he knows she had her in that freezer, and Norma says she checked out, and Norman says she probably hid her luggage somewhere. He tells her that he will always love her, and that he thinks she needs to let him handle things from now on, and she reassures him that everything will be okay, and hugs him. Now, of course, she has no idea what he's talking about. She didn't even know that Audrey was killed, and again, she's trying to pass this off as nothing's wrong, but this is definitely very interesting what's come up here, and the fact that Norman thinks that, this Norma personality is actually Norma really does go with the movie. I mean, we remember, of course, the classic scene in Psycho, I Wouldn't Hurt a Fly, when it's Norma's voice, but it's Norman, and it is Norman, but for whatever reason, he's getting taken over by Norman. It's very interesting. So Romero calls up to the house as he wanted to check if everything was fine. Norma says it is, and he reminds her that she showed up at his house and proposed to him for insurance, if you remember. But he said no. He said he didn't want to do it. And she says a silly request, and he tells her that she has to get the pit filled in as it's dangerous. And she says she needs to get Norman into Pineview, and Romero asks her if she's afraid of being in the house alone with him. And she's saying that if she's scared, she should let him know. And and I like that he said, look, if you're scared, I'm going to help you out. It really shows that these two are getting closer, and this episode especially. These two are definitely going to get married, and it's going to be the thing that Norman kills Norma over, because we know that the reason that Norman kills Norma is because of the fact that she loves someone other than him. And you can definitely see in this episode that she's definitely trying to steer herself away from Norman. As much as she's trying to act like that loving, motherly figure, she knows she can't really do that anymore, because all that's going to do is make him, keep up this charade that's not real, and she doesn't want that. And he says that Norman has to be admitted and give her the money, telling her that after a couple months, Norman can be out on his insurance. And when Vicky asks if Norman is related to him, Romero says that he is marrying Norma. So he's going through that. He's planning on marrying her, which is very interesting. I like seeing that. Definitely very interesting that we saw that. So Norma obviously doesn't know about this. She doesn't know that they're actually getting married. She thinks that he doesn't want it, but knowing that he actually does want to get married, I think is very interesting. It really shows the genuine care he has for her, and I really like that. So as Norman reads from Great Expectations, Norma looks out the window at the pit as she has a vision of Audrey being buried before stopping him from reading, and she advises him to upstairs and rest as she has chores to do, and he tells her he can help her, but she says she can manage on her own, and this is obviously something she needs to do. She doesn't know what she's going to find in this pit. That's the thing. So heading outside, she climbs down into the pit, trudging through the dirty water, and comes across a glove. And a car pulls up as new guests arrive, and we don't know where this glove is or why it's there, but it obviously has to do with Audrey's killing or Bradley's killing or something like that. Obviously, she is startled, but we see a car pulls up as new guests arrive, and Norma climbs up out of the pit to be confronted by Norman, who asks her what she's doing, and He says he's going to check the new guests in before they get into an argument, and he grabs her arm, and he tells her that he needs to protect her and that she should go up to the house and change, saying that he's not above making a scene, and if he has to make a scene, he's going to. And it really just shows how gone Norman is. I mean, the fact that he's saying, look, I'm going to make a scene, I don't give a fuck if you want me to make a scene, whatever, but I need to know what's going on. I mean, it really shows how gone he really is. And it's sad, but I gotta say, Freddie Highmore is acting the shit out of this character, I have to say. He's just doing such a great job, and especially this entire episode, he was so good. So as Norman checks a new guest in, Norma receives a call from Romero, who tells her that he has managed to get Norman into Pineview, and he'll marry her if she still wants to go through with it. And I thought it was good that he said that, he made her think that this wasn't just something stupid. Like, he does legitimately want to marry her, and Norma says that she doesn't know how to thank him, and he tells her that Pineview are sending some papers, and since Norman's 18, he needs to sign a consent form saying that he gave them the motel fax number, and Norma realizes that Norman is down there. And obviously, this terrifies her because she knows how dangerous he is and he can't be around guests right now. So as he finishes checking the guests in, the papers come through, and when they leave, he hears the sound of the fax machine and finds the forms. And again, terrifying thing to think about, knowing that why those forms are there. He's obviously, really angry because of it. So as Will and Dylan, and that is really the big moment that changed this episode completely. Because after that, that is when this episode gets amazing. I mean, like I said, it was already fine, but it was a lot of, okay, we've seen this before. Not after this scene. After this scene, it gets incredible. But we do get this really cute scene with Will and Dylan. Will and Dylan have a coffee. And I like this scene here because we know that Will hasn't been the best father to Emma, but it seems like he really wants to. And Dylan asks him about his time as a professor and says he never got to go to college. Will wants to say thanks for him being there for Emma, and if she makes it through her ordeal, she's going to have a future. He also mentions that the two of them are going to be together. He has to think of something else than selling pot, as he's too good to be doing that. And I like this. I like seeing this dynamic here. It's an unexpected dynamic, but I like it, and I like that Will said that he's actually very good at selling things, and that maybe Dylan's going to want to be a salesman. I could honestly see him going into that, category. Going into that, what do you call it? Occupation is what I'm trying to say, not category, occupation. So Dylan goes to see Emma, who says that she feels better, thanks him for coming. He says she can do anything now and tells her that he has to get back to the farm. And you can just tell that everything's really different for Emma. I mean, she's not used to not having this tube. She's always had this tube and she doesn't have it. And it's interesting to see her without it. You can tell that she's a lot more free, and she herself feels free, and I like seeing that. And she asks if he'll be back and says she wants him to come back, and it's a sweet scene. It really is. You see how much these two like each other, and I really do love Dylan and Emma, I have to say. They're really the thing that's keeping the show lighthearted. I mean, there's really nothing, but with a show like this, you have to have some breathing room. I mean, it's such an intense show, especially for what happens after this scene. You gotta have some breathing room, and I'm glad that they did that, because without that, I don't know what I'd do. Because then we get to the crazy stuff this episode. I mean, this is when the episode gets insane. And Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga, I mean, they're usually incredible, but this scene especially. 1, very hard to pull off, not easy to do at all. 2, 0 from 60 like that. So Norman sits in the office looking at the consent forms. He hallucinates his father, who says, and we haven't heard about his father in a while, but if you remember, this whole show started with us knowing that his father was killed by Norma, and that's kind of how they got to White Pine Bay as a fresh start, if you remember that. So very interesting. He hallucinates his father, who says that Norma has always been crazy. Norman tells him that he's not really there, asking him to leave as he has a memory of striking his father with the blender. And Sam says he didn't kill him, but Norman says he did, as Norma told him, and Sam says it was Norma who killed him and that she lied to him, and he tells them, we know it was Norman, we know it wasn't Norma. He tells Norman they need to control his mother before she destroys him, and essentially, this changes everything. I mean, now it's no longer about Norman, having these blackouts. It's now about Norman controlling his mother. That's what this is about. He's now controlling his mother. He thinks that she is this killer, and he thinks that she's responsible for all these deaths, and it really changes everything. And after this, it really shows that they can never go back to that bond. Norman leaves the office to go back to the house, and Norma goes in the office but finds that the papers already arrived and that they're gone. And when she arrives back at the house, she finds Norman in the kitchen. He asks where she's been. She decides to prepare dinner, but he refuses to leave her alone, and he doesn't trust her. He says, look, I am not doing this. I'm not listening to you while you prepare dinner, believing she's not in her right mind. And as Norma eats her dinner, he sits in silence opposite her and starts to creep her out. He approaches her, saying that there's something dark in her and needs to be stopped, and saying that she should be scared. And of course, she has no idea what he's talking about. He says that he knows she killed Audrey and attempted to cover her tracks in the pit. He also believes she killed Blair Watson and Bradley since she was jealous of them, as well as killing his father. And getting angrier, he says she's trying to blame him so that he can be locked up, and he won't allow her to do that. She flees from the table. He chases her upstairs. She runs into her room, but can't find the gun under her mattress, and Norman has it. Norma asks her to give it to her. He says he can't, and she cautiously approaches him, trying to kiss him as she reaches for the gun. Now, we've had scenes like this before. We've had scenes where we saw Norma almost try to kill Norman, we've seen that before, but not quite what happens exactly, because he refuses to give it over, and Norma runs into Dylan's room, barricading herself. She phones Romero for help, and it's crazy. And it seems like that's the end of the episode. Like, it seems like that'd be the way to end it. That's not how the episode ends. So, like, I thought that was gonna be the end, but it's not, because there's more, and it only gets crazier. Sometime later, she emerges from the room, checks if the coast is clear. She heads downstairs, and she finds the laptop turned on, playing a DVD, and grabs a scissor. And why a scissor? A scissor's not gonna knock him out. She is basically willing to kill Norman if she has to, because she's realizing she can't stop him. And I think this is a defining moment where Norman knows that they no longer have that bond. They can never have that bond. I mean, Norman now is accusing her of things that she has no idea what the hell he's talking about. I mean, she never did any of these things, but he thinks she is. And he thinks she's a savage killer, which she's not. So going down to the basement, she comes face to face with Norman, who tells her the best way to get to her was to ignore her. He says he found the consent forms, that he's not going to let her lock him up, as he's not the one doing crazy things, which of course he is. And she tells him that he has to trust her, but he says he doesn't. She says Pineview's a nice place, and all he has to do is sign the consent forms, but Norman says he can't leave her to run amok. And then we get this crazy thing here. He aims a gun at her from his line of speech. He intends on killing both of them, literally. Like, he's willing to kill himself just so they can be together. I mean, that is how gone Norman is. I mean, this, like I said, so hard to watch. She takes the gun, tells Romero he won't sign the papers, and Romero is ready to take him away, because that's what Norma wants. She wants him gone. But what I love is that you do see that care that Norma even has. Even when she can't control Norman and doesn't know what the hell's going on with him, she still is trying to be a good mother to him, and it really shows the kind of person that Norma is. She'll always try to be that mother, and no matter what happens, and that's exactly what she tries to do here. We see that she Norma apologizes to Norman, says that she had to contact him. She takes the gun, tells Romero he won't sign the papers. Norman's being led away. She grabs the forms that runs after him, pleading with him to sign the forms. And after a few seconds, he finally signs it. Romero takes him away, and they're pretty much gone forever. I really don't see their bond lasting that much longer. It's a devastating way to end the episode, but that's how it ends. And oh my god, amazing stuff. Just amazing stuff overall. I mean, like I said, the beginning of the episode felt like your average episode, and then it just turned into the craziest shit ever. I mean, the fact that Norman is now basically, accusing Norma of all these things that she didn't do, it's perfect, because that's exactly what happened in Psycho. If you remember, Norman said, oh, it wasn't me, it was Mother, but of course his mother was dead. And we know, I'm pretty sure, that Norman's gonna end up killing Norma. I mean, I'm pretty sure that this episode confirms that. Knowing what he was gonna do to her, the fact that he was gonna kill both of them, oh yeah, he's perfectly capable of killing Norma if he has to, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to. I'm pretty sure that she's going to die. Romero and her, I think they're going to get married, but I do think that Norman's going to kill both of them, and I don't see either of them living very long. I don't see Emma living very long either, because she's happy, and you can't really be happy on the show. That's just not a thing. Everyone else is miserable, and Dylan and Emma are away from all of it. But I do think that Dylan's going to stay with Emma because he really cares about her, and they work very well together. I like the way that whole thing is playing out. And do you think that Dylan might have a career possibly as a salesman? I mean, Emma's dad brings up a good point. He's very good at what he does, and he's better than just selling a bunch of, drugs. He's better than that. And that he should try to do something else, which I think is very interesting the way that that was playing out, and I really like the way that that was handled overall. But like I said, just amazing, amazing stuff. I can't get over this episode. Really crazy overall. Very hard to watch. Like, definitely the last 10 minutes, very crazy, and hard to believe, I mean, how far they've gone, but Norman truly is gone. He thinks his mother personality is real. Of course it's not. It's in his head, and, you know, he's the one that's killed Audrey. We saw him do it. We saw him kill Miss Watts, and we saw him kill Bradley. They all were him. He pictured Norma was doing it, and it's crazy. I mean, and people have said, oh, we don't really have an explanation for it, but we kind of do. I mean, Norma's always been there for Norman, and she's always influenced him, and she's always told him, don't do this, do this. It makes sense why Norman would be so fucked up all the time. You know, he always thinks that he needs to do, you know, what Norma tells him to do, or he can't be with anyone else. I mean, it's really terrifying to think about. I mean, remember when Norman and Emma had the possibility of dating? I mean, now that's never going to happen. You know, Norman can't be with anyone but Norma, and Norma can't be with anyone except without Norman. You know, she needs to be without Norman, because now you can tell that she's completely terrified of her son. Horrifying to think about. And this is definitely a horror show now. Like, this has been a horror show, but I heard people say this is the episode that shows the rest of the show is going to be horror. I mean, it's going to be very hard to watch. I don't know what's going to happen, but like I said, those last 10 minutes, it felt like a season finale. I don't know how they top that, and I don't know where they go from here. We'll have to see what happens next, but let me know what you guys saw this episode. Crazy stuff. Absolutely love the last 10 minutes. The rest of it I thought was okay, but the last 10 minutes were great, and I will see you guys in my next video, which will be for Better Call Saul, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.